Kia Homefullness listeners, welcome to the month of April. Our theme this month is around belonging, designing connection with neighbors, which connects to the theme that Common Ground works on around building connected and collective living, which also leads to affordable living because there's more sharing and reciprocity, and to the permaculture ethics of people care. Now, I wanted to share with you about how I am revising the Homefullness show to be more practical and more relevant to you. The way that I'm designing the show is that we're going to have some episodes where you can integrate the information in your own life, wherever you're living right now, so that it becomes really relevant. And then talking about some systemic things that move this whole paradigm of housing that is more connected and more sustainable, more resilient, that we can do this also through the Homefullness show. What I'm now doing is offering the Homefullness community through the Patreon platform, where people who love the idea of supporting the show, but also want to take this practice of building homefullness further, personally and professionally, at this community platform that help you to deepen your knowledge and practice. And each theme of each month is going to have lots of resources. This month, we're going to have a special guest, Robin Allison, who's the founder of the Earth Song Eco Neighborhood and author of the book Co-Housing for Life. She'll be presenting at the National Permaculture Hui 10 to 13 April on the topic called Neighborliness for Resilience. And this fits so well with our theme this month. Through connection comes resilience. I really look forward to hearing her talk at the Hui and then also to hosting her on the platform where we'll be showcasing her episode later in the month. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was to offer a challenge. This is a set of actions that take you perhaps slightly out of your comfort zone and get you to build on the skills of, in this case, neighborliness and connection to neighbors. And why does this matter? It's because the neighborhoods do shape how we live. Again, connection and resilience are highly linked. We know what works better when we actually practice it ourselves. And this is something that we can do personally and professionally, going from people who are strangers to creating a real sense of community. So our Neighbor Connection Challenge is around making new connections with the people around you. You don't have to wait to join an eco-village or an intentional community. But what might be feeling to get in your way to introduce yourself to your neighbors? Do you feel like you're always missing each other? You've got different times of the day that you're outside, your own busyness, maybe a fear of being rejected by somebody who's never looked your way. Maybe they're of a different culture. You're not sure how to greet them. And probably a lot of it is due to poor design just of the neighborhood itself. Having houses with driveways that go right up in a car garage where people can just pull right in and pop into their house really doesn't help to be able to create neighborliness, where you have to go beyond your comfort zone to be able to greet people. That's the movement that we want, is to create neighborhoods where the design of the built environment actually intentionally helps around those social connections. But if you're living in a place that's not like that, let's look at some of the things that the challenge will invite you to do. To start small, you can pick from a number of options. You can just smile and say hello. You can reach out to learn your neighbor's name and something that interests them. If you even just spend time outside your home when you think a neighbor might be around, it allows for a more organic connection. And of course, taking a walk around the neighborhood itself. You can compliment your neighbor on something. Maybe it's the garden or their pet or even something they're wearing. Could you ask a small favor to borrow something? Might you invite to a cup of tea? Or you can even chat when you're putting out the rubbish bins. So these are really simple, easy ways without too much going out of your way. Some conversation starters in the challenge. You might say something like, "Oh, hey, I don't think we've met yet. My name is." Or, "Do you know of any good spots for," and you might say swimming or a cafe or working out. say something like, "Oh, your garden looks great. What do you like to grow?" Or, "How has your week been? And what do you most enjoy about living in this neighborhood?" So, very simple conversations to start out. And then we've got a way for you to reflect on how you're doing with this engagement. Has anything held you back from reaching out? What might you be worried could happen? But what is the best case outcome if you do? And what kind of neighbor do you want to be? You can either put that into a journal or just take time to reflect. So the challenge is that the first 2 days, you're going to acknowledge the people in your neighborhood. Day 3 and 4, start one short conversation. Day 5, learn something about one of your neighbors and remember their name. Day 6, make sure to spend some time outside in your neighborhood. And day 7, reflect on how it's all gone. We do have a longer and more in-depth challenge for those who join the Homefullness community at Patreon. If you want something that's a bit more in depth, where you would like to have a particular event in your neighborhood, and maybe how you might start a shared tool library or something else that you might be able to share, we're going to have more of those for the Patreon members. And again, you don't need to wait to join your perfect neighborhood. You can start where you are. In making this episode and thinking about that topic, I reflected on my own background and saw where community has been lacking in my life, but also where community has really added a lot of value. So, if we start way back when I was first born, my parents lived in Silver Spring, Maryland. My first neighborhood was a cul-de-sac, which was actually quite nice in that it had a swimming pool and a community building. I remember my mom renting the place for my birthday parties, and it meant that all of us kids could kind of run around between the houses without too much car traffic. So we were really free range kids. I remember it was in the 80s, parents just letting us run around until it got dark and then calling us in. And it was a happy childhood in that way, that we were free to explore and create in the natural environment. But the downside of that community being not an intentional community is that when my mother and father divorced and she became a single mother, and she was a very independent woman and didn't want to specifically rely on anybody, it meant that I became a latchkey kid. I do remember one time when she'd left to go to a university study for a morning on a Saturday, and I was riding my bike as usual, and my dog ran in front of my bike. I fell over and injured my foot really badly. And I don't remember having an adult that I could go to. And so I hobbled home crying and in pain and made my way back into my empty house. And I just remember sitting there in pain and crying and just wishing, when is my mom coming home so she can help me? And eventually she did come home and took me to the hospital. And it ends up I had a broken ankle. But I thought, wow, what kind of a situation where my mother didn't feel comfortable to ask somebody to be able to look after me. If we had been in an intentional community like a co-housing or cooperative housing, where there's just that built-in social connection and familiarity, it might have been that one of the neighbors just would have just taken me to the hospital and left a note at my home, given that in the 80s we didn't have cell phones. And of course, when I became a single mother, both in South Africa and here in New Zealand, I also found that not living in an intentional community with neighbors that I had a good relationship with was making the parenting more difficult. I found I had to do a lot more on my own. And so I think, particularly for families with children, intentional communities can be really wonderful. And so with elderly people who like a little bit more interaction, and it makes a nice intergenerational experience if a community can have that full range of ages. But anyway, things did get easier in terms of community for my mother and I when she joined the Foreign Service and we moved to Moscow. She was working for the US Embassy. Rather than having proximity neighbors, we had more social neighbors. These were other expatriates who were either working for a diplomatic mission or with a company overseas, And there was quite a structure to all the expatriates staying in connection. There was pool, swimming, and community clubs, and movie events, and hiking, and other sporting things, and dinners. And I just remember there being lots organized between the various expatriate communities. We always had something going on. And when we arrived to a new country, we were assigned a family to be our host for the first month or so to teach us all about this new country and town that we were living in, the ins and outs of how to navigate buying things or simple phrases in the language. So that was a really easy way to come into the community with a facilitated host. And that was quite a nice structure, I found, that even though we were foreigners in a country, so we weren't part of as much the local community, we did have our expatriate community. I had also a great community, which I really loved. I went to a small college of only 1,500, and the social structure was really strong there too. But when I got married and moved out into San Diego, California, just to live on our own, I found it quite isolating to just be a random person in a city and trying to make our way and figure everything out without having any friends or family to orient us. And that's sort of when I started to realize what I actually do want is to live in intentional community, sort of replicating what I had in the Foreign Service and at college. Well, I am still on that mission of trying to make intentional community. I'm living here at Riverside, which is an 83-year-old intentional community in the top of the South Island of New Zealand. I have a tiny home and they had land to lease, but the lease is only for 3 years. I've had mine extended to January of 2027. What I really like about living here is that there is a sense of neighborliness. We have a WhatsApp group that helps us to be able to borrow and share with one another, ask things of each other. And even if there's a lost or found child, that ends up on that WhatsApp group. And that's been really helpful to have that easy connection. But when I first moved here and was setting up my tiny home and I needed to level my house out, I asked a neighbor here who I didn't know at all if I could borrow his jack to jack up my house and create some level. Well, he came over with the jack. I said, well, I'm not quite sure how to use it. Could you explain it to me? And he ended up spending hours under my house digging up the earth to be able to level it. And I was just so impressed with his sense of care for me moving in and wanting me to feel really comfortable in my new home. And then while setting up my house, I also had other neighbors lend me tools and a ladder. And about 2 months after moving here, I hurt myself really badly. I fell down my stairs and injured myself so much that I could hardly move my head and my arm. And I reached out through the WhatsApp group and said, oh, I really am struggling. And I had an offer of someone to bring me a large amount of chopped kindling. That was a teenage boy. And another offer from a woman to come and do my dishes and clean my house. Wow, I was just overjoyed. I'd hardly even met these people, and they were offering themselves to help. And then last night is a case in point as well. I went out to a concert with my friends. We had made dinner and we all thought the other had turned the oven off. And when we got to the concert quite far away, I had this inkling, oh, we didn't turn the oven off. Well, I got on the phone, found a neighbor. She offered to come running up to my house and turn off the oven. So, yay, we didn't come home to a burned meal. The other thing which I like about living at Riverside is that there's a weekly community meal. There's a hall, and there are people who show up to make food. A lot of it, the ingredients are from the food garden on site, and whoever wants can show up. So some residents living here, some wider community, and it's a great way just to touch base. And there's also the cafe at the bottom of the community for residents and the wider community for entertainment and food. So those are other ways that it's been really nice to live here in this intentional community. And in South Africa, I also lived in an intentional community for about 9 years. Half of those were great, and the other half were terrible. The first half was great because we were all new to the community and really forming it into what we wanted it to be. We had seasonal celebrations, equinox and solstice, where we'd have people, our friends, show up and bring food. We'd set long tables and decorate the tables with seasonal decorations and share food and music and stories. And sometimes we do performances. And it was really great, those seasonal times. The other things we did together was home educate our children, taking turns to teach the children things, planting and harvesting some crops, sharing our medicinal plants or food that we were growing, looking at other wider land care like fire management. And when the children went to school, we shared driving them because it was so far away. So those are the great things about our intentional community. Now, the downfall was such that actually the ownership tenure model wasn't right. We didn't put it into a trust, and we didn't actually have secure titles, those of us who lived there. So the breakdown, yes, was social, but I think in the bigger scheme of things, it was sort of economic and legal. That was the rocky foundation on which we had built the community. And I have to say, the worst neighborhood relationships that I've had have been in New Zealand, actually. In Hamilton, we unfortunately bought in a gang area, and we were literally right next door to a gang house where they were drug dealing. There was a lot of domestic violence where we had to call the police regularly. Even on our first week there, we had the police do a raid of the place, and they were running around, and they had somebody on the front lawn, and my car was stolen from my driveway. We were threatened, and it was very disturbing when we were hearing the domestic violence. That was the worst neighbor I've ever had. It was really not possible to make good connections because of the drug use and the criminal activity. But also, my time in suburbia in New Zealand has also felt quite isolating. It's just people living next to each other, and my tenure has never been that secure anyway. So I've always moved on before I've even been able to make really good connections. Again, that's another layer of the problem with housing here in this country is the rise in rents or the rise in mortgage rates, which make for really difficult to stay in place if things get too expensive. Again, that's for another episode, but it doesn't help to create good neighbor connections when one doesn't know how long one is going to be in a particular home. So having security of tenure is another thing that I really care a lot about because that allows people to put down roots and really make some strong relationships with where they're living. And my long-term aspiration, because I have to leave Riverside, is to live in a thriving eco-village. I'd like to create such a thing, and maybe one day I'll go live at Narara. If you're interested to hear about the Narara Eco-Village outside of Sydney, you can listen to the previous Homefullness episode where I interview Lyndall Paris about how she created the eco-village and what it's like to live there. She says that kindness is one of the top values that she feels while living there as a neighbor herself. And then I also have an interview with Stephanie and Tristan of the Peterborough Housing Cooperative, and they talk a lot about neighborliness and helping each other, doing things together. Collective housing is so they have that sense of support and belonging and kind of a security and resilience from those connections. Now, one of the podcasts that I follow is also about an intentional community called Serenbe, and the name of their podcast is called Serenbe Stories. It is a biophilic community, means it is life-loving and life in all the forms, people and the environment and nature. It's near Atlanta, Georgia, and it was intentionally designed to be socially connecting. So they highly value good neighborliness and to be ecologically sustainable and also to be regenerative, to bring more regeneration to the bigger region. So it is a rural area, and they would love to keep the rural culture through being able to foster people staying in place and using their land in regenerative ways. So Steve Nygren, the founder of the community, has his story about how he started that community, what prompted it, and how it's grown. And he's also now written a book called Start in Your Own Backyard, Transforming Where We Live with Radical Common Sense. And what I like is that We don't have to wait around for government or global systems or our local council or for some for-purpose developer to build it for us. We can start locally with where we are and how we are. So he is trying to combat the loneliness epidemic and the environmental damage and also the unwellness that in general people have, particularly in America, that come from poorly designed communities. So he has created Serenbe to be human-centered and nature integrated. And then he realized, well, not everybody can move to Serenbe, but what he does realize is people can start shaping where they live and start in their own backyards. Some of the key takeaways is that if we keep going with modern suburban sprawl, it carries on keeping people feeling isolated. We have a dependency on cars, and it does lead to poor health and stress. So we really need to think as planners, as community development professionals, as housing developers, that as placemakers, that how we design future neighborhoods really does influence well-being and behavior, good environmental and social outcomes. And the way we have our built environment disconnects us from nature. I've spoken about how our garages people pull in and we can't meet our neighbors so easily that way. And then we don't have a lot of local food systems where we can just go out and grow our own food. We're disconnected from our own food. A lot of it's imported from we don't even know where. So good neighborhoods actually would have those things embedded within them. Designed for nature, designed for people connection, and designed for local food systems, whether that be enough for people to grow their own or community growing spaces. And to integrate nature is not an optional, and it's not just about providing a playground, it's actually providing all the different ways in which nature can come through with natural plants and wetland systems. It should be actually embedded within the infrastructure itself. And small local actions can be scaled up. So once we start realizing that we can create change in our own neighborhoods, we feel more empowered. We feel like we've got some influence. And with that influence, we become known for what we are doing. We become known for the ways that we work, and we can be seen to be a neighborhood connector, and then that even going further into our region. So it's a bottom-up approach. And we've seen that sprawl is not an efficient use of space or resources, but clustering communities is the way that we need to move forward with planning our housing. And that's not just in urban areas where we do talk about density, medium density, and even high with apartments, but we can do the same kind of density in rural areas. You can have clustered homes, row homes, which leave a lot more open space. The Takaka co-housing is a great example here in my region, where the houses are duplexes, so each house shares a wall. And we see in the Lotus Eco Village, just north of Wellington, they've got a set of row houses. I think there's about 8 or 10 houses sharing the wall between them, and then leaving a lot of common space out in the front to have immediate interaction with nature. So we can see that even in the rural areas, that clustered housing is really important. And of course, community is built with intentionality. It doesn't usually happen by accident, and that's usually only over generations of people are in place. But if we design connection into the structure, then people who are even new to arrive to a community can easily make new friends, neighbors. So that means we need to look at walkability and shared space, of course, intergenerational living, and creating spaces for everyday interaction. And local food systems do matter, encouraging local agriculture, community-supported agriculture, and edible landscaping. So this is all from Steve Nygren's book, Start in Your Own Backyard. So what he recommends at the individual and household level: can you plant a garden or make compost? Can you spend a bit more time outdoors? Can you walk and bike instead of driving? Can you host neighbors for meals? Can your kids freely play outside? And what relationships are you building with your neighbors? That's our theme of the month, which we've given you some great tips in our monthly challenge. At the neighborhood level, you can advocate. You can advocate for walkable streets, mixed use zoning, which allows for homes and commercial shops and cafes, that kind of thing, to be in one area, and for more green spaces and trails that connect neighborhoods so you can keep going on the greenways without having to go onto the roads. You can support local food initiatives like farmers markets and encourage intergenerational interaction with maybe specific events. And then for professionals, planners, developers, and leaders, you can create community land trusts, which then keep land perpetually stewarded by the community, could be used for affordable housing, but also for ecological purposes. Again, that clustering scale, human scale development, looking at clean energy, different kinds of architecture, walkable communities. So that's the book's framework. Start where you are, connect with nature, design spaces intentionally for health and interaction with nature and people, and that small changes do build momentum and help us to become advocates for this to be at a wider scale. Again, you can find my free Neighborhood Connection Challenge and Starter Kit. It will be available for anyone on the Common Ground website. That's commonground.net.nz. But if you want to go further, learn and practice a bit more, and support the work that I'm doing, you can go to the Homefullness community on Patreon. I'll give a link to that in the show notes, where we have a 30-day journey continuing in that neighbor connection, giving you maybe some scripts to try, some gathering, how you might do a meal or some other event in your neighborhood, and some reflections to help you build your confidence around that. The other link, which I found quite interesting, that has to do with this topic, I was listening to the Serenbe stories. And if you're struggling with your children on screens, and particularly smartphones where they would have access to all this adult content, then you can look at this pledge. It's called Let Them Roam Pledge. I'll put that link in the show notes, where neighbors living in a community or nearby each other where kids might come and go regularly have a shared commitment to delay smartphones for their children. With collective action, it makes individual choices for parents more sustainable. And it means that when children visit the neighbors or their friends, all the parents who've signed this Let Them Roam pledge can feel secure in knowing their children are not exposed to adult content. Again, this is around building connection to neighbors, because if we can make some agreements between ourselves with how we would like to protect our children, this is a fantastic way to take it that much step further than just trying to limit your own child, but we create a culture of safety for children between us. So before we end this episode, I want to mention some things that I shared in our newsletter, which you can get on the Common Ground website. You'll see a tab at the top that says newsletter. All of our past published newsletters are there. So some of the things that I'm offering, services and events and ways of learning, where you can get the links to these on the newsletter. So if you're working on a housing project or intentional community, or you have a group that's looking into these things, and you're looking for support that might move your project forward with more ease, or to facilitate difficult conversations around strategy and design and making decisions, I can help you with services where I can facilitate a meeting or strategy session with your team or your community. Check out the services that I have. If you go under Work Together on the Common Ground website, you'll see the different things that I can help your group or you with. And you can book a discovery call where we can discuss what it is that you'd like me to help you with and what might be the best route forward. I host monthly Women Revolutionizing Housing online networking and learning events. Our next event is on Wednesday, the 8th of April at 12:30 p.m. You can go to the Women Revolutionizing Housing tab on the Common Ground website to register for the network, as well as to attend the online series of events. I'm exploring developing a course specifically in residential property development for people who want to develop or be part of the development of a community-focused housing project, whether it be co-housing, cooperative housing, an eco-village, a community land trust, etc. So normally these property development courses are stock standard, but I'm looking at curating one that is for those of us interested in this community-focused housing. So if this is of interest to you to participate and learn or to be a service provider and share your knowledge, go to the Property Development Course tab on the website and you will find the forms at the bottom of the page. I'm offering connection labs, which are play shops for groups to increase effective communication and collaboration. I've got 4 play shops under this connection labs that might interest your group in communication based on NVC format, in team building and collaborative games and activities, in movement using contact dance as the foundation, and playback theater, being able to have empathy for other stories by playing in another's shoes. I did mention about creating a tiny home co-housing eco neighborhood. I'm working with 2 other women around the feasibility of such a development. We're still looking at the feasibility, but if this is something that interests you to be a stakeholder in this, that you're interested to live there or want to help it to be the first of its kind, then go to that page on the Common Ground website and sign up of your interest. Now, if you are not already subscribed to the Homefullness show, go to any app and please subscribe so that you're able to be alerted when we get the newest show uploaded. And of course, the Patreon community. If you are on the North Island, I'm going to be doing a tour May to August of anybody doing intentional community work, regenerative development, who is doing my passion projects of playback theater, contact dance, and vegan activism. If you are interested as a housing enthusiast to meet up with me or to have me offer one of my play shops to a small group, I'm happy to talk about how we can do that. So please be in touch with me, Zola at commonground.net.nz. Other resources in New Zealand, we have a peak body for advancing collective housing called the Housing Innovation Society. Do please join us there, website of the same name, so we're able to advance this movement nationally around collective and affordable housing. And then other resources that I share on that newsletter is the Global Eco Village Network for folks particularly interested in eco villages around the world to visit or to learn from. And then a Foundation for Intentional Community. They offer lots of short courses so you can learn all the things about what it's like to live or form an intentional community. And also it's a directory where you can visit or join communities that are in their directory. So stay tuned. We're going to have future episodes with Robin Allison with her Neighborliness for Resilience topic. And another episode, we're going to be looking specifically at nonviolent communication techniques or compassionate communication to aid you in the conversations where maybe there's some tension between you as neighbors that needs to be resolved or within your wider community. And we're going to share with you some of the techniques that help you to move through that conflict feeling a bit more confident and at ease. It's been wonderful having you to be part of this audience, and I'd really love to have you to be part of the Homefullness community, where we're going to be able to meet online at least quarterly for those of you who care about any of these topics of connected living and affordable housing and sustainable ways of living. So I encourage you to share this episode or any of the other episodes that you really love. Join us in the Patreon community, and I look forward to continuing to offer you important resources and stories. Kia ora.